Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank you for joining us today for the Rural Violent Crime Reduction Initiative, or RVCRI Crime Data in Rural Communities webinar. My name is Samantha Reinierson, and I'm a Senior Program Manager here at the National Policing Institute for the RVCRI team. And I'm joined today by Dr. Jessica Herbert, CEO and founder of Idea Analytics, Heather Perez, who's the Project Director of the Bureau of Justice Assistance Crime Analyst in Residence Program, and Caitlin Maloney, the Program Manager, as well as Katie Mosehauer, Director of State Initiatives at the Council of State Governments, who leads the Justice Counts program as well. Alongside those folks, I have with me today Policy Advisor Juliana Palmer of the Bureau of Justice Assistance and John Connolly, who's a Senior Program Officer at the Local Initiative Support Corporation and our partner here on the RVCRI. Before we dive into today's webinar, just a few event logistics for everyone. One, we are being recorded, as you heard at the announcement at the beginning of the webinar today. We will distribute the recording for future access. Law enforcement sensitive data that is shared will be blurred from that recording. We'll send out a notice to you all once that recording is available on the website. Today, everyone who is attending has been muted to prevent background noise from entering the webinar. Towards the end of the webinar today, we will send you a quick evaluation survey. It should only take a couple of moments of your time, and we do appreciate you all filling that out as it helps us improve for future events. And lastly, but certainly not least, we'll be answering questions at the end of today's presentation. So if you do have a question along the way, please feel free to put that into either the chat or the Q&A features that you see at the bottom of your screen there. A few of you also submitted questions with your registration, so we'll be addressing those at the end of today's webinar as well. I'd like to take a few moments just to introduce our presenters. So first, we have Dr. Jessica Herbert, who I mentioned is the founder and CEO of Idea Analytics. Dr. Herbert has over 20 years of experience in policing, research, and data science, and has led clients through transformational projects. As the leader of Idea Analytics, Jessica believes that the path for change and transformations includes meaningful collaboration among stakeholders. Her career has spanned government, public, and private industries, and she began her career in law enforcement in Fairfax County, Virginia, where her analytical and investigative skills supported multi-year investigations for the Northern Virginia Violent Crime and Firearms Task Force. During that time, she also held a teaching position with George Mason University. Her expertise has been leveraged across national programs, including the Bureau of Justice Assistance Diagnostic Center, the National Public Safety Partnership, Crime Analyst on Demand and Technology Initiatives, and Project Safe Neighborhoods. She holds a doctorate in criminology and criminal justice from Arizona State University. We also have Heather Perez with us today, who is an advisor at CNA Corporation's Justice Research and Innovation Center. She serves as the project director for the National Initiatives Law Enforcement and Prosecution, Crime and Corrections Analyst in Residence Program, and as a subject matter expert on the Smart Policing Initiatives grant. Ms. Perez is an expert in violence reduction strategies, strategic action planning, partnership building, research partner acquisition, and drug market intervention training. She holds a Master's of Art in Criminal Justice from the University of Nebraska at Omaha. She has more than 30 years of experience with action research and training and technical assistance. Caitlin Maloney also works at CNA's Center for Research, Justice, and Innovation as an associate research analyst, where she's the program manager for the Crime Analyst in Residence program. In other work in support of the DOJ, she provides federally funded training and technical assistance to state and local criminal justice agencies across the nation. She also has experience serving on teams that support law enforcement auditing and assessments. Katie serves as the Deputy Director of State Initiatives at the Council of State Governments Justice Center, where she assists the division in conceptualizing and constructing new projects and publications that help advance the criminal justice field. Prior to joining the CSG Justice Center, Katie was the Executive Director at Washington Appleseed, which is a legal advocacy organization dedicated to generating research-based public policy impacting underserved populations in Washington State. As Executive Director, she developed and directed multi-agency projects on topics ranging from early childhood nutrition to community reentry from prison. Katie holds a Bachelor's of Arts in Anthropology from the University of Virginia. So on today's agenda for the webinar, you'll see here, we're going to discuss the use of crime analysis in rural communities, including common challenges that are faced. I think a few of those challenges were asked about in some of our registration questions. You're going to learn about various crime analysis techniques and opportunities and hear about some available resources from two other BJA programs, as well as from Dr. Herbert's company Idea Analytics. And then, as I mentioned at the end, we'll open it up for questions and answers for folks. So with that, I'm going to turn the floor over to Dr. Herbert. So Jessica, the floor is yours. In true Zoom fashion, you're muted, Jessica.
Thank you, Sam. Look, we tested the sharing, but we didn't test the microphone. So good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Jessica with ID Analytics, and I'm going to talk to you today about our digital transformation and analytical capacity program. ID Analytics is a partner for local governments, public safety, and nonprofits who are interested in changing the way that they use data and technology in their organizations to help them with their public safety and community services. So throughout my presentation here this morning, I'm going to talk to you about kind of three characteristics that are most important to align within your organization in order to use data and technology efficiently and effectively. Our digital transformation and analytical capacity program, or DTAC, as you may hear me reference throughout today, is regarding leadership, people, and technology. For leadership, it's about being clear on what your strategies are or what your capacity in your organization is able to do as you're thinking through succession planning or other kind of leadership development. When we think about people in your organization, we're not just thinking about the analyst, and I'm going to talk about one of the myths that I hear quite frequently, but we're thinking about multidisciplinary teams that help you with your public safety services. This includes hiring and onboarding and other kind of organizational structures that allow you to kind of grow not only the skill sets for people, but also the different needs that you have over time for your organization. And lastly, but definitely not least, and one of the ways that we're connecting here today is about the technology. Oftentimes we hear agencies say, I just need to buy this tool, or I just need to have this platform. And the reality is that there's much more strategic planning that goes into technology related to how you assess your needs, how it is interoperable with other technology in your agency already, as well as the skill training and development for your team in that. So as I talk about our DTAC program today and the examples for leadership and people and technology, I want you to think about how these things are aligned or perhaps not aligned within your agency and where you need to kind of grow capacity. Today, I'm going to focus primarily on leadership because that is where everything starts for an organization, and thinking about what it is that we want to know, how frequently do we want to know it, and why is it important for us. There we go. Oops. And so in thinking about leadership, I'm going to think about what are the goals of data and analytics for policing leaders. And that's going to be really important to just set the foundation, but also map your needs and your goals for data and analytics to the types of crime analysis techniques that are needed. This is where you might want something that an analyst doesn't necessarily have the skill for when we think across those crime analysis techniques. So I'm going to help you map some of your priorities on leadership, people, and technology when we think about the process to develop your data and information. And in each of those crime analysis techniques, I'm also going to discuss what needs to be true for your department. There's oftentimes where people think that just buying a platform or perhaps having an analyst is the solution to having data and effective technology uses. And it's not just one or the other, as it is all three of these things. So as I already alluded, I wanted to debunk a few myths or two as we get started in thinking about what do I need in order to start my crime analysis program. And oftentimes people think, well, I just need an analyst and therefore I will have a program. And unfortunately, this is where the crime analysis field has kind of been misaligned with those analytical expectations over the years. And that most analysts often never really produce data or strategic driven data for their agency, as they may just be providing case support for specific detectives or a small number of information or research information for particular crimes. And that's where before you start thinking about the who or the people that you need, it may not necessarily be an analyst as you start your program, as it may be information technology people or other types of kind of data governance supporters in order for you to procure information so that an analyst can perform. If you're seeking an analyst to do some of those things, this is where kind of aligning the right personnel or the kind of right processes are important. This is where some modern tools and processes can be helpful. And we often think, well, if I just have an analyst and a platform, that will be helpful. However, this is where an agency really needs to evaluate some of those tools and processes with the person. And that's where the first overlap between people and technology take place. This also leads me to the other kind of myth that we hear oftentimes from folks of like, well, if I can just identify the people that are committing crimes quicker, I can go make arrests and therefore I'll have less crime. I can tell you from my career in law enforcement, and perhaps for many of you that are on the call today, we have not figured out a way to arrest our way out of crime yet. And we can keep making arrests, but often thinking through what a more appropriate response for our communities would be helpful to kind of minimize those persistent crime issues. So by identifying a single person can be helpful for a single crime pattern and definitely potentially save life or reduce fear in our communities, it really is about developing more information around long-term crime reduction strategies, which is where that data and information should be leading you towards throughout your crime analysis program. So when I think about leadership and its importance and the kind of leadership people and technology components for capacity building, it's really about answering this question of what should data and analytics do for policing in general, but also for the policing leaders that are trying to figure out which strategy works best for them. And this is where I like the quote from Seth Godin here. It's a person who's explored digital transformation projects across multiple industries, including government. And there's two parts of this quote that I want to make sure you kind of keep in mind and give as a gut check for yourself over time. Is that if you're measuring something, what makes it useful is that it measures something that matters, which means that it's aligning to your goals. So if your goal is crime reduction, but all you're doing is producing what happened last week for your crime, then that metric of just what has happened is not useful for your crime reduction strategies. And we probably need to do a little bit more processing and provide a little bit more context to that metric in order to make it matter. The other thing that we want to think about in making measures is that if data and information is not helping you make a decision or perhaps not make a decision, and it's changing your actions, then it's also not ready for you yet. So I always like to equate this to almost like a mobile banking app. If you can log in immediately and see how much money you have or how much money has cleared your account or if something has been paid out or deposited, then you can make better decisions about how you're spending your money. Hopefully, or you're going to make a decision that you spend too much at Starbucks for coffee sometimes. But this is where that information is helping you make a decision and or potentially changing your actions. And when I think about what crime analysis or crime data should be doing for leadership and policing, it should be helping those. So if that data about crime last week is not helping you decide where you should put your officers or what they need to pay attention to today, then it's still not ready for you. So keep these two things in mind as you think about what it is that you want for your agency and crime analysis and using data and information and how that information is hopefully going to help you align with your goals, but also think and behave differently once you are made aware of it. This is where leadership defining its priorities is really important. Every organization on the call today or listening to this later is going to say, yep, we have leaders in our organization. We probably have computers, which is why we're connecting today. And we have people. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're aligned. If leadership isn't clear about the goals and kind of what it is that they're willing to work for, make fiscal and long-term commitments towards those things, then people probably aren't going to produce information that aligns with those. And the technology that's available in the organization may or may not help with that. We see oftentimes that crime analysts or other people who are developing information in an organization is doing a lot of manual processes to try to answer to leadership. And that really hinders your ability to know things in a timely and actionable fashion. Throughout our digital transformation and analytical capacity program, we look at evidence-based ways to align all three of these things so that you operate in that sweet spot right in the center of that darkest kind of gray triangle, where leadership knows exactly what they want, why it's important, and have used their power and their experience to kind of educate that in the community and the organization. And people and technology are supporting those missions and those goals throughout any part of your data and information life cycles there. So this is where we can find ways in which an organization can align one or two of these things, but we work across your organization to understand how to align all three of those and have those things work very clearly. One of the things that we do in our kind of early workshops for leadership is help with that identification of data priorities. These are 5 crime analysis techniques. They are not people. They are ways in which data is developed or data models are developed in your organization to hopefully answer your questions. And when we work with organizations in our leadership workshops, we do a variety of interactive sessions to understand what is your priorities and how do they map to all of these. You can imagine if we have more of your command staff in line, we might be having more questions around how are things working, what are our practices and policies internally to the department, or where our resource allocations are, and those would be in your administrative or operational techniques. Whereas if we're talking to patrol and investigators, they're very much focused on short-term crime patterns for their responses, or even over in the person and organized groups. What's important to know for an organization is that you really do want all 5 of these throughout your organization and staff that can perform 2 to 3 of these at any given time. And that sometimes is not only a crime analyst, but it might be an information technology or a business analyst that can help support this. So as you think through kind of what it is that's a priority to know and why it's important and how it helps you plan for the health of your department going forward, we really want to focus on where the data is being collected the most. And this is where your tactical kind of crime patterns and crime solutions or crime responses are really important, as well as some of the internal practices and policies. So related to your training or complaint data, fleet management, and things of that nature. So if we focus our efforts on building those foundations, it allows us to go kind of across the whole spectrum here to have information to focus on where we would be looking at a small set of groups or people on the crime intel side, or thinking about different resource allocation for different efforts on the administrative side. So keep this spectrum in mind as we continue to explore these a little bit further. Oftentimes for agencies that are seeking to start up their crime analysis program, or maybe even refine what their crime analyst is doing, they're really focusing on these tactical and strategic areas. This is where understanding what's happening on shift over the last 48 or 20 or 74 hours that you perhaps were off shift, and understanding any kind of current problems or patterns that are emerging so that you can allocate your patrol resources or designate your investigators to that. Why these are perhaps the most common in data development, it really is about developing this information in a way that allows you to identify the solutions to disrupt those persistent crime problems, not just know what has happened or what might be happening in that way. It's really about the disruption aspect. So for you to have a really robust crime analysis procedure to focus on strategic and tactical reporting, these are the 3 things that need to be true. Data needs to be collected by your RMS or even your CAD system in a timely manner. CAD is generally timely because it's just all connected with a 911 call and dispatching. But if your officers or your records division are taking a week or more in order to process their reports and put those things into the system, that's where you're going to have some hindrances of a really robust crime analysis strategy here. This is often where leadership needs the most amount of input, because an analyst is going to tell you that we're answering a lot of non-police required calls, or we're answering a lot of property related incidences, because those are just the ones that eat up our resources the most. But yet leadership for policing goes to community meetings and sits with their mayor or their city managers and constantly hear about violent crime and other types of things that create fear in our society. And so that's where leadership, really understanding what's a priority, even if it's not based on the numbers, but also understanding how the numbers may dictate what those priorities are. And that's the first way in which people in leadership really overlap in this type of workshop. Lastly, but definitely not least important, is that an analytical tool to develop any of this information should directly connect to your data source. If your analyst is having to extract information or retype information, or they're still reading reports, or you think that that's the best way for them to operate, that's a very old school way of thinking about the field and thinking through what are the right technology systems that can be used for us to automate these things so that we can build data models to immediately flag our priorities for ourselves. If you have all three of these things together, you're able to build a plethora of different data products. This is an example from a rural organization in the state of Washington that I believe is underneath about 6,000 individuals, mostly a lot of farms, and dealing with a lot of new housing and other kind of businesses that are being built. For them, they correspond a lot with their fire department on calls that are related to both opioid or other substance abuse issues, as well as mental health issues. So for them, looking at their calls for service with their fire department, in addition to what is police initiated or public initiated, helps them understand kind of what's going on. So why this is not an interactive model just here on the slide, they can click around in any given year or any given call type to really understand how those patterns and trends have been changing. For those of you that might have questions around use of force, fleet or accident management, training aspects, or our responses, or how things like doing a no pursuit policy, or decriminalizing certain drugs are changing the way in which we're responding, those types of questions fall within administrative and operational analytical techniques. Because these questions are related to various types of your organization and are an internal reflection of how your organization is doing, there's a few things that need to be true for an analyst or a business analyst to operate in this realm. The first thing is that all of your data for these different areas of training, IA, and like fleet management, and various other kind of policy guidelines, are often managed by third-party vendors. And so displaying that information on a screen and not being able to extract it is not going to be acceptable. And that's where the data needs to be available in a raw data format for an analyst to manipulate. Because they're collecting data from all of these different disparate data sources, the agency needs to have a data storage and governance practice. Even if it's about shared servers and kind of permissions across folders on a shared drive, those types of established practices need to be clear for anybody who accesses that information. And an analyst needs to have strong statistical skills to do some modeling in this area to understand, certain impacts to financial areas of these data sets. Things like, how much is car repairs costing us? Is the price of gas changing? If we implement this training that costs X dollars, what would that look like to kind of alleviate some of our practices that it's trying to address? And so this is where an analyst needs to have some strong statistical skills and ability to kind of piece things together for multiple data sets. This is an example from an agency that wanted to look at changes over an 8-year and counting period for their overtime. Initially, their overtime might have been driven by high rates of crime and the kind of overage of court or investigation hours, whereas more recent issues within the department might be because of overtime on holdover because of minimum staffing and various other things. So we've blocked out some names to the department, as well as some categories that would be an indicator of this department. But this is where this type of dashboard allows them to see where they're spending their overtime funds, and what is impacting that, which is really helpful into budget conversations or thinking about a reallocation of staff across different divisions. Lastly, but definitely not least, is the crime intel analysis. This is where a lot of people get focused of, I just need an analyst to help me identify a person, and they go across social media to do those things. And that's actually not what intel analysis is. It is about focusing on that small group of people that are causing most of your problems in some type of organized fashion, whether that individual is acting in a kind of organized ring for thefts like catalytic converters or retail thefts, or it's passing drugs and weapons and other types of things in our organizations. So an agency really has to have access to a lot of open source data sources and the ability to kind of validate those open data sources. Analysts in this area are often looking at video or photographic evidence and knowing how to validate and rely upon that information through looking at MD5 hashes or various other kind of video contexts that will hold up for probable cause in any kind of investigation. This is where investigating organized groups and people really does butt up against other federal or state partners, and understanding those data governance practices for operational security and information sharing will be really important for your department. The analyst who focuses specifically on organized groups and people and their behaviors and the criminal element merely means that they also have cultural and behavioral contexts, so that it allows you to understand how to break up those groups or how to kind of dissipate the network of individuals for those things. And why we all love those cases, because they're so interesting and it really produces some interesting charts. For us, we do protect the privacy of our clients' cases as it may impact some current investigations that are going on. And so some of the cooler things that we get to look at with our clients, I can't share with you here today. However, I can tell you when we do focus on people and assessing the risk of individuals in a particular agency or a particular jurisdiction, we do want to focus on both offending and victimization practices. And that's where we developed a systematic method to allow us to identify what are some of those things that are triggering somebody's interactions with the criminal justice system. And this example here, when this individual was a concern among law enforcement, it would be typical for a crime analyst to only present upon their suspect interactions and where they were offending. And this is where looking at the whole person allows us to identify a more appropriate response. That this individual in their late teen years was unfortunately victim to several sexual assaults, and it may have been happening within the family, as well as a suicide attempt. And that was, perhaps some indicators in explaining some of the anger and substance abuse, as well as delinquent behaviors we're seeing that are often trauma responses in our youth or our young adults here. So having a more holistic picture about people and what they're dealing with in your jurisdiction will allow you to have a better appropriate response, and think about those multidisciplinary teams that you develop to address those aspects. Same assessment system is used again for the offending and victimization score, as you see here in the first two columns. I'm not sharing the names of the individuals for privacy reasons, but because this agency also had a priority around gun violence, scoring out separately individuals who might have had a high rate of gun violence or gun interactions with the jurisdiction helps them identify people to focus on. So why the person in the green box is coming into contact with law enforcement quite frequently, only part or a third of their interactions is around gun violence, but yet they seem to be leading some of the gun violence efforts within the city there. Whereas the person in red is somebody who's having a co-occurring victimization and offending. And we see that with interpersonal crimes, as well as mental health or other types of kind of domestic violence or other types of abuses that are happening. And how we break up that cycle would be very different than perhaps how we would address the person that's in green or even the person in blue here. So again, a systematic way of evaluating those interactions so that you can identify what's the best resource, and is that a law enforcement resource or response, or is it a partner within our city or county programs for those things. Why an agency starting or thinking about transforming their crime analysis program is going to want one or more of these. The goal here throughout the DTAC program is to position the agency to have a foundation across all five, and knowing which ones to use at different points in time and at different cadences throughout the year, so that you can operate in your best informed fashion with data and technology. After all of that information, I want you to at least take away these things. You do not need to have $30 million and be a big city to have a crime analysis program or some other type of program that allows you to use data and information effectively. This is where every agency can develop a strategy within their resources and in their people and technology to kind of support these approaches and have crime reduction. And while an analyst doesn't equal data and data doesn't equal an analyst, really understanding what it is that you're trying to focus on in your first phases will help you identify who you need, and quite potentially, you might already have some of those resources within your jurisdiction first. And that's where, some of the technology kind of helps augment some of those practices there. So if any of this is of interest to you, we have some other details about our DTAC program here that will be available on these slides. And if you want to schedule for your assessment or talk with us further about this, we automate our assessment process because we want to focus your time and energy as well as ours on implementations and solutions. And so you can go to our website to schedule a call or take the assessment and be in contact with us for further discussion. So with that, I will turn it over to Heather and Caitlin to talk about the Crime Analysis program, or Crime Analyst in Residence program.
Thank you, Jessica. All right, good afternoon, everyone. We appreciate the opportunity to join you today. I am Heather Perez. I'm the project director for the Crime Analyst in Residence program. So you'll hear me say CAR, not CARP, throughout the rest of the presentation. I am very fortunate to have worked on the program since the very beginning. We originally presented our CAR project plan to BJA in May of 2022, and we have accomplished much in the last 2 years, as you will hear from Caitlin here in just a moment. We have up on the screen our CAR team. We have senior policy leadership from BJA, from John Markovic. Many of you may be familiar with him. He is absolutely wonderful, and crime analysis is his passion. As you can see, myself, project director, Caitlin, project manager. We have 3 full-time embedded analysts that are dedicated specifically to the CAR program. These are individuals who are receiving awards in the field of crime analysis. They sit on boards, they plan regional association conferences. So just a lot of experience there. We're also very fortunate to have 8 subject matter experts. If I ran through their names, you would probably recognize several of them. While we get our slide up, I will continue for time. Okay, awesome. So the CAR program. The purpose of our program is to establish an innovative program for law enforcement agencies around the country to work with an on-site embedded crime analyst, participate in remote technical assistance, and receive resources to enhance their analytical capacity and capability. The goal being to more fully integrate sophisticated crime and data analysis practices, products, tools, and information in the daily operations and management of a department of violent crime and property crime reduction efforts. We are working with small and rural and tribal agencies across the country that have executive level support to enhance their crime analysis to address a precipitous increase in violent and/or property crime. These are agencies that have little to no capacity when we first engage with them. The CAR team provides this training and technical assistance at no cost for the agencies with the support of BJA. This investment is proving to be of great value, not only to the site specifically, but also in a regional capacity. So what we expect of the agencies that get accepted into the CAR program is to identify broad agency goals in relation to crime analysis, identify a primary point of contact for the program, identify a primary training recipient, establish a workspace for an embedded analyst in proximity to the primary training recipient, communicate program overview and approved access to the site, authorize and assist with obtaining read-only access to the back-end data for the embedded analyst to have access to, dedication of leadership to work with the embedded analyst and the subject matter expert to implement recommendations to the best of their ability. After we accept and onboard a site, we try to be on-site location within 1 month. During the first visit, a capacity assessment created specifically for the CAR program is conducted, as well as holding meetings with generally more than 10 individuals or divisions. A project plan is then written and presented during the second site visit, which occurs approximately 1 month following the first visit. Training also begins during that second visit, and then the third, fourth, and fifth, if needed, site visits occur 1 month each apart. The training recipient varies across the sites. It is not one set person or division. The site determines that after we have conducted the onboarding and/or conducted the capacity assessment. The training recipient agrees to devote 1 week per month to in-person training, 2 hours of virtual training bi-weekly, produce analytical products in between those visits, and work to sustain increased capacity post-CAR TTA. In between being on site, the remote training is provided. A sustainability plan is provided at the end of the active engagement. So after those 6 months of intensive TTA, the analyst remains engaged, although they are no longer going on site or having regularly scheduled weekly calls. Just a few other things that we do ask of the agency is to complete a monthly evaluation to make sure that we are staying on track. Approval of an engagement summary and a case study, and then attend a regional meeting of graduated sites. We ask a graduated site to be the host for our regional meetings. South Milwaukee from cohort 1 was the host of our inaugural regional meeting. Blacksburg will host the second meeting, which we're about ready to undertake on August 12th through the 15th. The graduated sites from cohort 2 and 3 will be attending that meeting in Blacksburg. They'll be sharing their successes, challenges, and talking about sustainability practices. The CAR team will provide enhanced training that maybe was not able to be provided during our active engagement with the site. So benefits that the CAR sites can anticipate is that they will work with the SME and senior crime analyst to provide that in-residence and remote TTA access to the guidebook. I'm going to show you some examples of that in just a moment, but I do want to give a shout out to our team member, Amanda Bruner, who developed extensive amounts of materials for this guidebook. And then other benefits to engage in peer exchanges with law enforcement agencies, build that analytic and intelligence capacity to solve cases, receive assistance in identifying crime patterns. Just to make a note too, we do not require or expect the agencies to purchase anything more than they have in place. We very much meet them at where they are. So if that means working with them in Access or Excel or Google MapMaper, something along those lines, we definitely do not have an expectation for large purchases to be involved in the CAR program. Other benefits to learn tailored crime reduction strategies, enhance that transparency and integrity with BJA loves to hear those words, and then receive that engagement summary and a case study. The engagement summary is for internal purposes for the agency to reflect upon and continue to work through their sustainability plan. The case study is a public-facing document that can be found on our website. So I'm just going to very, very quickly give you some examples of materials that we have developed that are in the guidebook. The guidebook is private access only. We only do that because we want the sites to be fully trained on how to use these materials in an appropriate manner. So we have developed, using the agency's data, we train them on these templates that already have all the macros embedded. They are able to customize their agency logo. The CAR branding does somewhat remain on there just to identify origin of development. So obviously, simple things such as intelligence bulletins. So criminal history, link analysis, anything along those lines. We also work with them on developing bulletins. So attempt to ID, missing persons. We work with them on developing repeat incidents, so calls for service, developing patterns. So we've got hot prey, hot settings, developing internal and external products, so community crime notifications. And again, all of this is with their data and training them on how to make these templates. Looking at problems, so problem offenders, problem locations. Accountability, helping the agency determine if they are meeting their goals. Statistics, so crime statistic, rolling timelines, again, internal and external templates and products to be developed and used here. Crime maps, which everyone is familiar with, but again, we're talking about agencies that have little to no capacity. So really starting from the beginning with developing some materials with them. And then dashboards, so automation, just a few things too that we didn't show, helping them with developing memos, so purchase justifications, training requests, policies, job descriptions, anything along those lines. And then lastly, so just so everyone knows where we are, we do have 9 graduated CAR sites and we have 7 active sites. I'm going to turn it over to Caitlin so that she gets to cover some really cool successes that we've seen in a very short amount of time with the sites that we are interacting with. So Caitlin.
Thank you, Heather. I'm going to go over and highlight some of the successes like Heather had said. This is definitely not a comprehensive list of all that we've done because of time, but these are just sort of the highlights that we wanted to share with you all. So our pilot site is Fitchburg, Wisconsin. We helped them establish a working group. It was actually 5 police departments that shared 1 analyst. So this working group is meets on a regular basis, and they decide that what is the most pertinent for that trained analyst to do for them. And then we also have trained up an individual in each of those agencies to do some of the basic crime analysis stuff themselves. We've also set them up with peer-to-peer support with Blacksburg, which I will talk a little bit about Blacksburg in a moment. Actually right now. So cohort 1 of Blacksburg, Virginia. We helped them set up a regional collaboration as well. Their 1 analyst kind of has her own quasi-fusion center now with surrounding agencies. So that is why we have set them up with Blacksburg because they did really well with that. And they also have a connection to Project Safe Neighborhoods. So we helped the analyst create a automated report in which they can actually search PSN individuals to sort of highlight to see if they've been involved in anything in the Blacksburg area. South Milwaukee and Westland both have now collaboration meetings between various members of the department. And in South Milwaukee, we actually helped them solve a local theft case that had gone through, I think, 3 or 4 different jurisdictions that they weren't able to sort of piece together until after we came. Cohort 2, East Lansing, in Michigan, we helped establish a working group for new policies and procedures. There was actually 3 training recipients in East Lansing. So the chief really wanted to focus most of the time on creating a comprehensive policy and procedure of what each individual trainee was responsible for in relation to crime analysis. In Pennsylvania County, we helped a deputy create automated reports for 30, 60, 90 days at the touch of a button. Cohort 3 in Fuquay-Varina, we helped them create a bunch of Power BI dashboards from officer productivity to some DDAX. Madera County, we also created some Power BI dashboards, and we helped them create an internal SharePoint site to share within their agency products, bulletins, bolos, etc. In Phoenix City, we had the detectives sit in on our intelligence analysis training. So they were kind of aware of what the new skills the crime analysts had to help them with some of their cases. Cohort 4, we're underway right now. So just so far, Casper, we've helped them create some of their Power BI dashboards, and that is used actually by the executives. Dearborn Heights is a collaborative reform initiative site. We are at the beginning of our engagement with them, but we are collaborating with that team as well. Gary, Indiana, again, at the beginning of our engagement, they are a PSN and National Public Safety Partnership site as well. So really a comprehensive assistance for them. Pineville, we've automated Part 1 and Group A crime statistics, rolling timelines, and helped them develop some link charts. And then St. Louis County, we've helped them develop templates and like bulletins and pattern products. Finally, we are in the very, very beginning phases of working with our cohort 5 sites, which is Tuskegee, Alabama. It's the smallest department in Carr right now, with 6 members of their department, including their chief. And they still only use paper records. So it just goes to show that no department is too small, and you can have paper records, you can have the most advanced technology. We are still willing and happy to come in and help you. And then our other site is North Miami, which is another collaborative reform site. So that was a very, very brief overview of the highlights that we have. So we are accepting up to 9 additional sites. And you can see our website is right there, crimeanalystinresidence.com. That has some more program information in detail. The application is on the site as well. And we also have case studies that go into a lot more detail about the successes that our sites have had so far. So now I'm going to pass it over to Katie. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Caitlin, and everyone else who's presented today. It's always so exciting to hear about all of the different data initiatives that are out in the field. So Justice Counts is a little bit of a different kind of initiative than some of what you've heard about today, but I'm excited to share about the opportunity. And just as you're listening, know that there's also opportunities for you to participate in this, so you can kind of be envisioning how Justice Counts can work for you as we dive through things. Let's do the next slide. All right, so the foundation of Justice Counts is, the things we've all struggled with, that it's actually kind of hard to get data out of your systems. Like, you all have data. That is definitely very, very true. But a lot of the data systems you're working with are all about managing the day-to-day of a job and not about telling stories that help to illustrate the needs of your departments or the impacts of a new policy. And so really Justice Counts is about kind of connecting the dots on a few different pieces. Justice Counts isn't a program to help you manage, your workforce or any of those really specific pieces. It's more about the high-level storytelling and big picture concepts of the work you do and your needs and your impacts. So our vision for Justice Counts is that it's a new kind of solution, and we want every single criminal justice agency in the country to share a common set of data and create the first kind of connected and complete picture of the criminal legal system. Now, when we've been designing this program, we were really thinking about, how does this work for everyone? If our goal is that everyone participates, it has to work for agencies that have a ton of resources and a ton of technology. It also has to work for, the areas where there are 2 staff members and everything is still on paper, as Caitlin was just saying as well. So we've really been thinking about, how do we create a flexible framework that first makes it easy for any scale of agency to share any data, that it is a program that's shaped by practitioners and people who do the work. So really, us at Justice Counts, we are kind of facilitators of this work, but it's really shaped by people who are actually leading agencies and in the field. That we wanted to create something that could be very customized. Every agency and every department operates differently and has different definitions. So we wanted to embrace that rather than fight against it in how we design Justice Counts. And again, we wanted to focus on stories. We know that stories are how you change hearts and minds. It's how you win new resources. And we really think that that's something that the field could use as an extra help with. And so Justice Counts is a very large, very expansive, and very collaborative. So let's tell you a little bit about what that means. So we have 20 national partners that really contribute to the day-to-day of the project. And that's everyone from, the National Sheriff's Association to the International Association of the Chiefs of Police, to research organizations and other technical assistance providers. We have sector-specific committees. So there's a specific law enforcement committee that really works to drive the creation and ideating a lot of the big work of the project. There's also a national steering committee of, again, leaders of every area of the criminal justice field. Now, the results of all of those people getting together is a tier of metrics, tier 1, as we refer to it, that is just a common set of really important things for everyone to know about their departments and be able to share about their departments. We now have upwards of 15 staff, actually, that are providing hands-on help to departments and other criminal justice agencies to share data. And we have a cutting-edge publishing tool, which I'll show you in just a minute. So this is the tier 1 of metrics. And so law enforcement is that first row of metrics that you see. But the real concept of justice counts is that you all work within a system of criminal justice, and it's like not a bubble. You're not on an island. So the metrics allow you to either really focus on your specific sector or to look across the spectrum. And for example, look at things like population movements and see how are populations progressing through the system in my area. And that could be in your county, that could be in your state, or that could be across the country. All right, so our goal is to, actually, let's go ahead to the next slide. We want to help make the most of the data you already had. If you're already working with charts like this, or if you have it, again, sketched out on paper, you can tell a lot from these numbers. They're helpful. They're the basis of everything, but it's hard to ask follow-up questions or really feel like it's telling a clear story. So we want to go from this to something that's much more dynamic. And our focus is that every hour you spend with the Justice Counts team results in a usable, dynamic product that you can use at the end of it. Because again, we want to make it easy and we want to make it not a burden for agencies. So with that, let's go over and show you how it actually works. All right, I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to show you our publishing tool. So this is up on the screen. This is a demo for law enforcement. So the first thing that you do when you sign up for Justice Counts is you say, let's set up the metrics. And there's choice in every single aspect of Justice Counts. So you can say which metrics you want to share and all the levels of detail. So you could say, you know what, I want to take a look at funding. If it's actually not a priority for you to share your funding, you can simply say that it's not available and it gets out of your way and drops to the bottom of your list. Or you can say, you know what, I'd like to share my funding because it would be really helpful for me to see what other rural agencies are doing and how they are funded. You can also define the calendar year, fiscal year, or other of how you calculate things. And then you can say, you know what, I only want to share the total number of funding that I have for my department. Or you can say, I want to show funding streams because that's going to help me. So then you can select from any of these options. So you could say, you know what, I actually know what all my funding is, and we don't fund our department at all through asset forfeiture. And you can just click those off. And then you can move on to defining things. And so for every metric, there's these lovely lists of things that the data might include and might not exclude. Because again, you're all different in many ways. And so it could be that, you know what, funding for a single fiscal year is what is reflected in your budget. So there's no biennium, there's no multi-year appropriations. And it could be that, actually, there are no construction projects going on. So I'm going to click that off. And then you simply save it. And anytime you share data on funding, that definition gets attached. So that means that if anyone's looking at your data, they will actually be able to see that definition so that they can understand actually what your numbers reflect. And when it comes to entering data, there's a bulk upload format. If you're a well-resourced and well-technologied organization and can export things in specific formats, you can use this kind of bulk upload. But manual entry is set up to be really, really easy. And so this is where it doesn't take a lot of resources to participate. So you can simply type in, I have a $5 million budget. $2.5 million of that comes from state appropriation, which I know is not real. Let's go 500,000 of that comes from here, and then I'm going to do the math wrong. So we're just going to pretend that looks great and adds up to the correct numbers for the moment. You can review it, and then you hit publish, and then you just go to view the data, and your data is here. I obviously put in very small numbers, so it doesn't look quite right in my demo account. But this is a great rundown where you can click through and see different versions of your data immediately as soon as you hit that publish button. And this is just the internal dashboard that's just for you. You can see things by count, you can see things by percentage, and you can do things like flip back and forth from your funding to your expenses and see that things aren't really moving in tandem. Why is that? And to show you some real world data, the Cass County Sheriff's Department is a really wonderful rural department that is working with Justice Counts. And this is their arrest data for, from 2023 month by month on. And so clearly some real declines in arrests. And when we look at this by offense type, we can start to see a little bit about the story that it tells us. we can see that, wow, this blue bar is really a much smaller proportion than it used to be, and those are drug offenses. So drug offense arrests have really declined for this department, but this like bright red line at the bottom, which is other offenses, has gotten bigger. So they're seeing a shift in what's happening in their community and what is getting arrested for. So those are a few ways. I'm going to stop sharing and go back. I don't think we need to put the rest of the slides up. I'll just say that it's meant to be easy. You're meant to get all sorts of cool bells and whistle tools. And if this is something that feels like a great opportunity for your department and you're interested in participating, I'll share a scheduling link. You're welcome to grab 30 minutes with me to chat a little bit about what this would look like for you and who else is participating in your community. We're in 25 states and 1 territory right now, working to provide intensive technical assistance either at the individual agency level or at the state level. So I want to make sure there's a couple minutes for questions. So Samantha, I'm going to pass it back to you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Katie. I really appreciate that. And so as Katie mentioned, we're going to open it up for questions now. I will actually leave my screen off of share so that you all can see the faces of the presenters while they're answering questions. If you haven't had time to put it in the chat or Q&A, feel free to do that now. And you'll see there's also those links in there as well that folks have been mentioning, links to Idea Analytics, links to the CAR program, and links for the Justice Counts. So with our first question that we've received from folks is, does having an analyst make sense for a department of less than 10 folks? So I think a couple of you all may have opinions on this, and we've heard from some of you that, you're working in agencies much, with 6 folks or even less than that. So with that question, Jessica, I think I'll pitch that one to you first, and then Caitlin or Heather, if you want to chime in on that one as well.
Thanks, Samantha. I think it always goes back to what is it that you think that you would like an analyst to do? This is where oftentimes small departments need a person who's in a bit of a hybrid position. And so it might be, not 100% time dedicated to an analysis. It might be something else in terms of information technology support or other kind of project management, program management support. I think there's also the, consideration of why your agency is small. What are the agencies around you? And so, is there a kind of shared position, with others? And I think Caitlin or Heather might have something to say about that based on one of their, or maybe even more of their agencies that they've worked with, of like, how do you create the right MOU or fiscal model to share resource among multiple agencies just so that you can have those needs there. So I'll let them answer up.
Thanks, Jessica. I agree. So that is exactly part of what we've seen to be of benefit for the sites in the CAR program has been building out this regional engagement and regional sharing. So the departments themselves are benefiting, and then departments surrounding, and then contributing sometimes to larger programs or initiatives going on. I think departments can have an analyst, when there are 5, 6, less than 10 folks. But as Jessica kind of alluded to, there is a strong possibility that person will have other responsibilities. It included in their ability to do crime analysis. That is part of what we work with just in general, regardless of the size of the agency that we're working with. And again, in general, we're working with agencies that have less than 100 officers, is just identifying that correct person and having that executive level support to allow that person time to do analysis.
Thanks, Heather. Thanks, Jessica. Another question that we've received in as well is, how do I manage and create accurate reports, charts, or mapping for folks that would be helpful across my stakeholders? So Katie, I think I'm actually going to pitch that one to you first, because I feel like that hits right into your recent demo. So I'll turn that to you.
It does. So obviously Justice Counts is a program that can help do that. I think a lot of the times, again, just seeing what is leaving your department and going to, others in your community. We know a lot of times we hear from law enforcement about how hard they're working on arrests, but then they don't see some of those arrests leading to prosecution. So being able to even look at the continuum of the arrests the department is making and have a prosecutor then be able in the same area to say, well, here's actually how we're declining cases and here's how we're choosing what to prosecute, and being able to look at those side by side for your community specifically can be really, really beneficial. So sometimes it's thinking about what are the common denominators that we are all going to care about. What is the most basic thing that would be the place to start? A lot of times we all want to go right to the deepest place of data because it's exciting and that's where a lot of us live. But sometimes it's what's the question that I want to answer? And then where can I start? And then that can be a springboard to some of the more complex data points that we've talked about today.
Great, thank you. And that brings us right up to the top of the hour. So I'm going to share my screen again quickly just so that I can put everyone's contact information up there. So you all should be able to see that now. If you are interested or have any follow-up questions, because I know we didn't get through them all that had come in, please feel free to reach out. We're happy to coordinate those for you with any of our presenters. And just as a reminder, you see it there on the screen, that QR code, that's that webinar evaluation survey that I mentioned at the top of the call, as well as my colleague has just put that in the chat for you, so you can access that either way. And again, we do appreciate you all filling those out. It does help us gear our future webinars to things that you're interested in. So with that, I will close us out. So thank you all for joining us. We appreciate the time and have a wonderful rest of your afternoon. Thanks, everyone.